call the meeting to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Brandy? Here. Mark?
Here.
Jay?
Here.
Bob?
Here.
Jeff?
Here.
Taylor?
Excused?
Kurt?
Here. Okay, there's 6 assembly members present. Now time for the voluntary pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I see nothing under approval of minutes on the agenda this evening. Next item on the agenda is 4, which is amendment or a motion to approve today's meeting agenda.
So moved.
Is that a motion to approve today?
A motion to approve, yes.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, we'll move forward with the agenda as presented. There are no public hearings this evening. Excuse me, no bid awards. So that brings us to item 7 on this evening's agenda, and that's visitors' views related to today's agenda. Any items on the agenda? You'd like to speak? It's okay.
Sure.
Please state your name and who you represent.
Hi, my name is Becky Knight. I represent myself tonight. I speak in support of the resolution to be considered tonight requesting an independent forensic audit of the Big Thorn and Tonka timber sales, and that funds lost from mismanagement of these 2 sales be restored to the rightful benefit of the affected communities. Restoration of those funds harms no demographic group in our community, and in fact would benefit all. I've been an in-depth observer of circumstances surrounding this issue since it was first made public. I first addressed the Assembly about it about 1 year ago, November 6th to be exact, and during 3 other occasions this year. Supporting documentation was made available months ago, as well as an exact duplicate of the resolution before you. And it would seem that those already on the Assembly are informed with it. The need for an independent audit is the result of findings made by the June 26 Forest Service Washington office report regarding mismanagement of timber sale oversight, contracts, and appraisals for these sales. In fact, the Forest Service itself report cited the need for, quote, an independent review. The Petersburg Ranger District's failure to inspect Viking Lumber Company's activities and required adherence to the timber sale contract for the Tonka sale cost taxpayers $2 million alone. Quote, more than twice the amount Viking Lumber paid for the timber, unquote. And moreover, appraisal issues resulted in, quote, a reduction in sale value of $1.7 million for the Big Thorn report. That's about $4 million. The Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility, or PEER, a service organization for government whistleblowers, first made the report public in 2017. Among 3 of the 18 formal findings, the review showed that, number 1, instead of improving forest ecosystem health, the Forest Service allowed Viking to high-grade the most ecologically valuable trees rather than those intended for removal. Number 2, the Forest Service failed to conduct long-established timber theft prevention inspections. And number 3, all monitoring and reports of timber removals, etc., were reported by Viking Lumber Company, not Forest Service sale administrators. To be clear, the Forest Service is the author of the report. PEER, Dave Beebe, who has also followed this issue closely, and I are only the messengers. Ahead of the vote last spring, action was stalled with a 2-2 vote, in part because Mayor Jensen did not think it was, quote, in the best interests for the borough to be involved. He considered it a discussion between public groups and the Forest Service and said he would like to see how things transpire. Well, it's 6 months later since that meeting, and there has been absolutely no apparent action from the agency during that time or in the 2 years since the report was issued. Moreover, passage of the resolution, the wording of which was lifted directly from the report, is a responsible action for the Assembly since it has direct economic and ecological impacts to our community. Mayor Jensen said today on Borough Business, we need to be careful how we draft a resolution and send it off to a federal agency. If there are issues with how they did their job and there is some money owed to the municipalities in the area, then fine, let's do something. In fact, the formal findings of a federal agency absolutely did determine there were issues of great magnitude, 18 in total, and according to those same documents, there were taxpayer losses totaling nearly $4 million. It is also disturbing that a kill-the-messenger mindset continues to be a motivating force behind the lack of support, as evidenced by Mayor Jensen's comments today, where he stated, "I'd like to know if Member Mucci was actually asked by environmental groups to put this on the agenda." Excuse me, but I respectfully ask if it is the policy of the Assembly to base their decision on who delivers the message rather than the merits of the supporting documentation and possible action. I respectfully ask that you unanimously support the resolution. To vote otherwise would send a clear message that not only is the timber industry a sacred cow, but there are no budgetary issues facing our community, and we are willing to allow millions of dollars to evaporate while suffering the economic and ecological cost with no apparent concern. I also ask that for the benefit of the community that you explain the rationale behind your vote tonight. And I suggest one friendly amendment for the second to last whereas. The wording nearly 2 years should be replaced with over 2 years. And just for the record, I've never spoken directly to Member Mucci about this issue other than during Assembly meetings, but I applaud him for the good sense to realize the resolution made responsible economic and ecological sense. And I prepared this statement before I came here tonight, and I actually thanked Member Mucci as we were walking in the door, so I guess I have communicated with him directly. I'm willing to answer questions.
I should have said this before. I should have put a time limit on, but there wasn't many people at the meeting. We're up to 5 minutes now.
I'm willing to answer questions you may have during your discussion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other visitors in the audience today with views related to items on the agenda? Please come forward, state your name and who you represent.
Hi, I'm David Berg.
I don't see a lot of people in the audience that are willing to want to talk. It looks like maybe half a dozen, so if you could keep it to 4 or 5 minutes, that'd be great.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Berg.
I'm going to have trouble speaking to this for longer than just a minute or two. I'm David Berg. I'm with Viking Travel. I want to speak to this ordinance 2018-19, amending the sales tax as it applies to cruise ships. I certainly am in favor of this ordinance on behalf of the ships that we represent and that I know that come into the area. With the advent of the marine passenger tax, marine passenger fee, I think that is going to be a much more equitable way of taxing having a fee that applies to the users of the borough, whether it be in the Cut Arm or Hobart, Thomas Bay, whatever, trying to determine the amount of that cruise ship invoice, if you will, that a passenger pays, and how much of that applies to the borough is up to interpretation of a lot of different people, and I think it's a lot easier and cleaner to just request a $5 passenger fee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berg. Who wants to speak next? I see there's more people interested. Just please step to the microphone to Mr. Whitethorn if you want to go next. That'd be good. State your name, who you represent, and
Yeah, my name is James Whitethorn, and I'm representing myself. I want to talk to this code revision that you're looking at, 09.218. And as I went through this thing, I picked out 2 or 3 things that I thought were pretty important for people to start looking at. Number one is the reducing the warehouse or the apartment unit on a warehouse to 750 square feet. But prior to this, there was no number at all. You could build as big as you want on either one of them as long as you're within the setbacks on your lot, on industrial property. So I would recommend that 750 that's mentioned in there a few times in your code book. Myself, I'd recommend having it the same as we had it before, and primarily for the reason that it's more tax revenue for the city. If you keep it as large as you can, still fit on the lot. But if you do end up having to go to a minimum size, I'd say 1,200 square feet would be the minimum. That's a small two-bedroom. The other one's like a small one-bedroom. And I think if a couple were in that unit, it'd be pretty darn small. My second complaint was this mentioning this fence deal. It's mentioned quite a few times in there, and got between 4 feet in the front of your yard, 6 feet on the sides, 4 feet on the back side. The standard fences that I've seen throughout anywhere I've been, it's been 6 feet. And also, it really concerns me if we're going to try to make people set these fences back, like on side property, 3 feet from the property line. Both neighbors did that. You've got a 6-foot dead spot in between. So what's going to happen with that land? Usually the fences are put right on the property lines or within your side of the property line. And I would recommend 6 foot all the way around, mainly here because you're going to have to, when you go to order your fencing, stuff is really expensive. And if you're going to want to order a little extra for each size you got, so you're going to have a lot of extra fencing, extra cost to you. So I think the 6 foot fence, it's pretty well adopted throughout the U.S. So I don't, the other one's just pretty confusing. Another thing I noticed that wasn't in there that I'd like to see put in there is timeshares on all housing. And why I say this is that someday you may end up here wanting to develop a timeshare in your own home and sell your home under timeshare rules and regulations. And what this does is it increases the value of your home because you sell that at probably a 3-time value. Well, once you got that 3-time value, you've got a big tax base here again to help support the town. And it's also good for the realty business. It's good for the downtown business to have more people coming in, more people buying things, more people using recreational services and there's nothing in there on timeshares in the whole book. The only other thing I had was that I think this 1-year time limit on building a house on your building permit should be expanded to 3-year period, or at least a 2-year period with an option of a 3rd year without buying another permit. There's quite a few people that are trying to build their house off their own dollars, and it's pretty hard to do it in 1 year to accumulate enough money to build a house. So that's all I have. If you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. White. Member Muse, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just trying to, as far as I understand it, tonight we're just going to read it into the record as in the first reading. And then there are several, at least a second public hearing in the ordinance is another chance for the public to comment. But over this whole schedule between when we start it, if we start it tonight, and the end, I think there's plans for several public hearings.
Yes, I'm not going to be available for it, so I just wanted to try to get mine in.
Yes, but those can also be put in writing.
I realize that.
And I just wanted to have those questions already been asked of the planning and zoning, or are these new comments based on the new?
These are just my personal comments from reading the book.
Okay.
That I see that I'd like to see in there at least so people can start talking about them.
Member Lynn, you have a question?
Back to your point on the fence. When you're thinking 6 foot in front on all the zoning, no matter whether it's industrial or residential. Is that your thinking, Jim?
Yeah, 6 foot all the way around. And after that, you'd have to get a variance to go any higher than 6 feet. That's a standard thing throughout the U.S. And the other one just sounds pretty complicated. You're losing land, if you have to set it, 3 feet from your property line. So, we lose enough land on your setbacks here. We don't really want to, we want to utilize that property, and for something. So,
Thank you.
Any other questions?
okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Whitethorn. I have a question for, I guess this might be PEC Director Cabrera. So, like Mr. Whitethorn just stated, he's not going to be available for either of the public hearings for his concerns to be listed for us to consider as an amendment to this scheduled to be on the December 17th meeting. Does he have to send it to us in writing, or is this good enough for his?
I wrote them all down. Yeah.
Pardon me?
I wrote them all down.
Okay,
So, but if he sends me an email, that would be even better, because then I could include that,
I just
so
was
that the
wondering if it was
assembly
gonna-
could read that, his comments as well. But I
Okay.
did make note of them.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else in the audience with views related to items on today's agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to visitors' views unrelated to items on today's agenda. Mr. Burgess?
Thank you, Mayor and Assembly, for allowing me to speak. My name is John Mergus. I am representing myself, my business, Petersburg Marine. As reported in the newspaper a few months ago, my boat haul-out business is one of 12 Southeast business finalists for an award of up to $25,000 for professional services to blend business development with environmental sustainability. The program is sponsored by Sea Alaska Corporation and the Nature Conservancy. To qualify, requires completing an intense series of workshops and training taking many tens of hours. Completion requires an extremely detailed business plan addressing all facets of a business, from marketing to financing to competition. My business is dependent on the Scow Bay turnaround, a borough-owned facility. As reported by your lobbyist at a previous assembly meeting, the Petersburg Borough has applied for its own 2018 grant of about $7 million to expand the same property with another boat ramp and boatyard. I know the Petersburg Economic Development Council authored the grant request, but the buck stops with the Borough Assembly, who is the grantee, in asking for the money. Your grant application is, in essence, your business plan for the development and operations of that facility. If you are awarded that grant, you have to follow the proposed plan. I am up against a wall moving forward with my business plan without knowing how I am allowed to fit it in your plan. I have asked the Petersburg Borough for a copy of the grant application and was denied by the borough attorney and borough clerk on the basis contents of the grant application are proprietary and could be used by another community to unfairly influence the granting agency. I respectfully disagree. Your plans are proprietary. Historically, those plans have been open to the public and even published on your webpage as recently as last year for a similar 2017 grant request from the same granting agency. I am also concerned about the lack of public openness of this project. The attitude seems to be the less the public knows, the better for the borough. The borough refers to the Scow Bay facility as a borough port. The title of the Harbor Board is Petersburg Ports and Harbors Advisory Committee. Yet the borough has had zero communications with the Harbor Board on the critical detailed development plans of Scow Bay project. Last year, the borough published proposed payment plans by vessel owners and reported it had discussions with potential service providers to manage the facility. So how does one qualify for being included in this group of service providers? By the way, no one contacted me. Why deny participation by the elected Harbor Board members who have such deep experience with large vessel ownership, maintenance, and boatyards? Harbor Board participation would at least ensure compliance with the Alaska Open Meetings Act requirements. The community of Petersburg, like all other Alaskan communities, has repeatedly affirmed its desire for open government. The Alaska Statutes on Open Government has one sentence in particular that stands out and should be a mission statement for all communities. It reads, quote, "The people, in delegating authority, do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know," unquote. So I am unsure of the formal procedures, but I am appealing to this assembly the borough's denial of providing me the requested grant application. That's it. To keep my testimony within the time frame, I have a little bit of background on the Spruce Root program and the correspondence relating to my testimony tonight that I'll pass on you folks.
Thanks, sir.
And so if you could point me in the right direction for an appeals process.
I would think the correct thing to do would be go talk to the borough clerk and find out what procedures are available to you. I would think you would go talk to the borough clerk and see what appeal processes are available to you, Mr. Burgess. I don't think we're going to deal with it this evening.
Yes.
I think it'd have to, and I don't know what the formal or appeal processes are, so.
And I also apologize for picking up a meeting. You can tell I've got a heck of a cold. I don't want to pass it around, so I'm going to disappear after this testimony. It seems to be kind of rude, but...
No, thank you for your testimony, Mr. Burgess. Is there any questions of Mr. Burgess? Mr. Member Walhutter?
Thank you, Mayor. This is probably more for Liz. Hey, Liz, the Harbor Board's already got a long-range plan for Scow Bay. Nothing's changed on that, has it?
No, it's still the same as what they've seen.
Okay, so those plans are available, conceptual plans are available. So they're available in the Harbor Shack if anybody's interested in seeing those. Yeah, I might even have a copy in my file.
Does that include the development plan?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't think they can go beyond, what they've already got planned, that's already in writing there. I don't know what they have planned out there, but I know they've always thought about, making that a larger area, filling it in, to maybe come up with about 2 acres of land there. And they would eventually like to put a harbor in there, dredge it and put a harbor in there. And that's as far as I know that they've been wanting to do, and so this, I think $7.5 million or whatever they're asking for is probably only going to be enough for the fill. So anyway, that's all I know. So I know those are available.
Okay, thank you, but I would recommend to go visit with the clerk and see what is available to you. So is there any other visitors in the audience today with views unrelated to items on today's agenda? Thank you, Mr. Burgess, for your testimony. We'll move forward to board, commission, and committee reports. There are none, and that brings us to the consent agenda. There are 2 items on the consent agenda. One is the Harbor Bar and Harbor Liquor Store liquor license renewal application for 2019 to 2020, and the other is discussion or approval of Alaska Municipal League Annual Conference travel by Assembly members November 12th and 16th. If it's good with the Assembly, I'll entertain a motion to approve both items on the consent agenda, or if you want to separate them out and have separate discussion on them, that's up to whoever makes the motion.
Make a motion that we just combine them.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion's been made by Member Walhutter, seconded by Member Morrell to vote on both items on the consent agenda this evening. And just for a little clarification, the Harbor Bar and Harbor Liquor Store license is fairly self-explanatory, but I'll just read under the action here for the people traveling to Alaska Municipal League Annual Conference and the Alaska Conference of Mayors in Anchorage, November 14th to the 16th. With Assembly approval, Assembly Member Norheim will attend the newly elected official training and the annual conference November 12th through the 16th, and Assembly Member Lynn will attend the annual conference from November 14th to 16th. Travel expenses for the mayor and 2 assembly members to attend the AML annual conference were approved with the fiscal year 2019 budget. So that's what's on that side of the consent agenda. I just wanted to put that out there for people listening. So if there's no discussion, we'll call the roll.
Hey, Kurt?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Okay, next item on the agenda is report of other officers, and we have a report this evening from Public Works Director Cotta, and he will give us an update on the recycling program, and he handed us each a packet when he came in. Would these be available to the public in print, Chris, or if they ask for them?
Yes, I brought several extra copies that are on the table
Okay,
back
thank
there.
you.
And I was also planning to post all this information to the borough's website.
Yep, thanks.
Yep. All right, good evening, everybody. I'm Chris Cotta, Public Works Director, and I'm here to give an update on our recycling program. Since I last reported to the Assembly on recycling in August, the value of recyclables has continued to be low. However, one key commodity, mixed paper, that constitutes almost 1/3 of our recyclable weight, has gained value. Our most recent shipment of recyclables cost us $114 per ton versus $120 per ton that we are currently paying for municipal solid waste, or MSW. So at least for the time being, it is once again costing us less to ship recyclables versus solid waste. Although we are hopeful that commodity prices will continue to improve, the recyclable markets are still too volatile to know what the long-term outlook is going to be. One very important indicator for the future of Petersburg's recycling program is whether the community is going to support the program going forward. Most of the comments received by Public Works to date, and in fact all of the written comments submitted thus far, are in favor of retaining the recycling program in some form. Petersburg's well-designed program is viewed as one of the premier recycling programs in Southeast Alaska. We offer more value and convenience to our customers than almost anyone else in our area. In addition to direct comments received, many questions about recycling and solid waste in general have been submitted to Public Works through the Assembly and Borough Manager, and I have provided these along with my responses as an attachment to this memorandum. All of this information, as well as a copy of this memo, will be posted to the borough's website. Hard copies will also be made available upon request. One subject of recent public discussion concerns the costs of operating Petersburg's recycling program in-house versus using a contractor, as in the past. The cost to operate the recycling program using borough personnel is much less than using a contractor, and this savings is the primary reason the borough took over recycling collections. One significant factor for the reduction in recycling program operating costs is that the borough did not hire any additional staff. We had 4 full-time sanitation personnel prior to the implementation of the recycling program, and we still have 4 full-time staff. In order to allow for time to do recycling collection routes with the same number of staff, we reduced public access hours at the baling facility on weekdays. There were capital costs incurred to acquire the 3rd collection truck and an adequate supply of blue recycling carts. However, the only significant additional operating costs incurred by the borough are the costs of maintaining and funding the replacement of the 3rd collection truck. For the time being, these costs have been largely mitigated by extending the service life of our oldest collection truck, which is still in good condition. This has helped significantly reduce the cost of operating the borough's recycling program, which is vitally important during these challenging times for the recycling industry. Besides low commodity values, there are some additional challenges facing the recycling program. One of the more significant concerns is the implementation of contamination charges by our recycling vendor, Republic Services. According to a memo from Republic, charges of up to $150 per ton will be assessed if a load is found to have more than 10% contamination. Although we have not been assessed any of these fees to date, we have been put on notice that our recycling stream has frequently exceeded the permissible level of contamination. To try and bring the program into compliance and avoid contamination charges in the future, we have stepped up our monitoring of customer recyclables and have started tagging and rejecting carts that contain unacceptable materials. We are also planning to do some public outreach and education on this subject to ensure that our recyclables are as clean as possible. This may also help raise the value of our commingled recyclables and bring the program closer to being self-sustaining in the future. So, what happens now? Based on feedback from the community received by Public Works, it seems that the citizens of Petersburg are generally supportive of the recycling program and wish for it to continue in some fashion. Although the recycling markets continue to be unpredictable, the costs of our program have been reduced to a point where they can be accommodated within the current operating budget. For For now, Public Works recommends continuing with the curbside recycling program until the future direction of commodity values becomes clear, or such time as a lack of community support would indicate scaling back or eliminating the program. We also intend to investigate other options for reducing our solid waste costs, such as composting and removing a larger percentage of glass from the waste stream. This surely won't be the end of the recycling discussion in Petersburg. We are willing to participate in an assembly work session and/or public meetings on this subject if this is desired. And anyone wanting more information on the recycling program or Petersburg solid waste operations in general should feel free to contact us or stop by Public Works anytime during business hours, and we'll be glad to discuss these subjects further. And I'll be glad to take any questions you may have at this time. Thank you.
Any questions of Public Works Director Connor? Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Chris. I kind of asked for this to be on the agenda as I had a bunch of questions about the program, the solid waste component of it, as well as the recycling. And just getting the documents tonight really doesn't give me a chance to kind of go through them and ask any real educated questions. But just reading along with you, what does it mean when it's contaminated?
That means, paper or cardboard that's been soiled or is wet beyond, being reusable. And in Southeast Alaska, in general, all the recycling programs that are run out of Southeast Alaska have moisture challenges, as might be expected in the rainforest.
Mr. Lynn?
Question, Chris, where do you plan now to go from here after tonight's presentation in terms of looking at the entire program? What's your thinking?
Well, we want to continue receiving input from the community. That's really important. Like I say, I've gotten mixed input, but the bulk of it, and in fact all of the written input, has been in favor of keeping recycling. Because of the way we've structured our program, it was, our cost right now to operate the program is really pretty low, and so it's not taking a big chunk out of our budget to run the program at this time. It's not making the money that it could, if commodity values were higher. But, because we didn't hire any additional staff and because we opted not to replace that third truck, we're gonna keep using it. The program costs are really pretty low, and so we intend to continue operating this program as it was built unless we get a different direction from the assembly on that.
Member Mucci, were you done?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, kind of, echo Assemblymember Lynn's, when I first started talking about this subject, I honestly think that we should spend an evening kind of talking about recycling and the solid waste issue as well as composting. I think there's a lot of community interest in what we're doing and how we're doing it. I get questions from folks asking, well, what happens to the stuff? What happens, just as the question, what happens to the glass that is turned in for recycling? What actually happens to it?
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and answer that. It's detailed in this attachment, which you didn't get until right before meeting time. But the glass basically all goes to the landfill. We use it for projects within the landfill. There's a little service road that we've been extending slowly, and so we're using that as kind of the sub-base for the road. If we don't have a place to put it, we just bury it. But we're not converting it into any other kind of usable product, because the numbers, that's come up several times in the past, and the numbers really don't support, like say grinding to make sand out of it or something like that. The biggest factor with the glass is just getting it out of the waste stream, because it's, it costs $120 per ton, just like everything else, solid waste that goes out of here. So the more of it we can get out and divert into the landfill, the better our bottom line is.
And so, Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So then, when the garbage truck, the recycle truck comes by my house and picks up my blue can, how does the person who is driving the truck enter into the program if I have brought my blue can down?
Right now, we don't really have an effective way in place of doing that. There was a system that was implemented along with the program that, it was basically a laptop that went around with the trucks, and there was a checklist with a timestamp and everything. That system just we never were able to get it to work completely right. So right now, we're not really tracking that at this time. We have the intention of getting that working again at some point, but...
So just a follow-up question. So if I don't bring my blue can down, am I paying the same rate as somebody who does bring their blue can down and in theory getting a reduced garbage rate?
Yeah, the reduced rate was for folks that are recycling. Like I said, we have not been tracking that I know of. And I did explain that in the attachment also.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'm not putting you on the spot, but I think I'd really like to spend an hour or two one evening talking about all these issues. And I think there's plenty of stuff to talk about. I mean, I've talked to folks up in Juneau who has a composting business. And she goes around to either restaurants once a week or businesses once a week, your home once a week, and picks up your composting material, charges you to pick them up in a 5-gallon barrel, a 5-gallon bucket. I mean, there's business opportunities out there. Chris talked about the glass grinding thing. There's a glass grinding machine that can be used to make sand-type material to mix in with concrete for street materials. I think there's lots of things out there that need to kind of get addressed. And if we're not keeping track of who's recycling and who's not, it really doesn't really make much difference to recycle. I mean, if we're going to do it, we need to have equipment that works so that we keep track of that kind of stuff, as opposed to, well, it's just not working. And I'm hoping under council discussion items we can kind of talk about possibly a work session in November or early December or in December, just to kind of spend an hour or two just talking about solid waste issue, recycling issues, and composting issues. I don't want to spend too much time.
And we're perfectly willing to do that.
No, thank you very much.
And just to add a little bit to the discussion, you were, your point about we're not tracking it. We're not keeping track of it as in there's a file where we have recorded, a spreadsheet or whatever. The crew generally knows who's supposed to be recycling, who's not. We notice somebody that's not for an extended period of time, that'll come up. However, going back to what I said before, we aren't going by a checklist like we intended to do in the beginning.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question about unless there's another assembly member with a question. Currently, we're paying $6 more a ton for the municipal solid waste versus recycling. Does that, we're still using the old truck, but I know that's just about at the end of its life expectancy. And we talked about this, I don't know, a couple months ago, and with a new vehicle, and like Member Mitri saying, we need to look at all the different aspects of this, and I agree with that, but then we need to come up with the cost of what it's going to be to recycle. If we have to put a new truck into the equation at $250,000 or whatever it costs, that's going to change, in my mind, this $114 versus $120 per ton. And yeah, the overall sanitation program, I know our Baylor is having issues, so at some point we need to address that as well. So it's all going to be a factor in this discussion.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I will be bringing some information forward about the Baylor. I decided I was going to do that at the next meeting since this was all about recycling. Okay. But yeah, I'll be back with some details on that.
All right, thank you for doing that. It'd be nice to have that information. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Cotta. Okay, so next item is Mayor's report. Pretty short. I added a few things to it, but we'll go over the generic one, where the borough is seeking letters of interest from qualified borough residents to serve our community by filling one of 2 vacant seats on the Historic Preservation Commission, one for an assembly member representative with a term ending 12/31/2019, one for an archaeologist or at-large member with a term ending 12/31/2020. Letters of interest may be submitted to the Borough Clerk via mail to Post Office Box 329, Petersburg, Alaska, 99833, or via email to dthompson@petersburgak.gov, or by just bringing them by the Borough office at 12 South Nordic Drive. At the next meeting, we will be appointing Assembly representatives to Alaska Municipal League, Southeast Conference, Vice Mayor, Assembly liaisons to the Harbor Board, Hospital Board, Public Safety Advisory Board. So that will be taking place next meeting. I will be out of town, as well as Member Norheim and Member Lynn. Do you have your dates when you're traveling yet, Member Lynn?
Yeah, same as wherever the dates were.
16th.
Yeah.
So when's the next meeting? He'll be back for the second meeting, but I'll be gone at the second meeting. I'm going to a wedding, so I will be gone for that meeting, but then we'll have a vice mayor in place. I just wanted to mention, like I did on the radio show today, the entire assembly and the other people of the communities, businesses, etc. But I just wanted to mention that the assembly's been invited to an Island Air Express happy hour, so there might be possibly more than 3 assembly members there, and I don't think it's an issue, but I just thought I'd mention that to the public, because if there's a quorum, people might get worried about it. So that's all I have to say for the mayor's report, and there is no manager's report. I'm sure we'll have one next meeting when Manager Giesbrecht is back. Seeing no other items under that, it's item 13 or 14, unfinished business. There's nothing there. New business. First item there is ordinance 2018-18. My thing just went blank on me. Oh, it'll come around. Remember. Thanks, Jay.
No worries.
I think it will.
Let's take it.
There we go. I just hit the wrong button. I do that a lot. Okay, we're on ordinance 2018-18, an ordinance amending the Petersburg Municipal Code by repealing Title 18, Subdivision, and 19, Zoning, and adopting a new Borough Development Code. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve this ordinance in its first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Stanton Gregor, seconded by Member Mucci. Discussion. Member Stanton Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Director Cabrera, if I may. I guess first question would be, just for those listening at home, when did this topic become a public discussion? When did you first involve the public in this? You got a ballpark date, just to give some historical context.
Sure.
Thank you.
So March 6th, 2017, I did a presentation for the assembly on that date. So that was the first notice that we were going to start looking at revising the development code and some general ideas on the direction we were going.
Thanks. And since March of 2017, if you can kind of give people listening at home, if you know, like how many public hearings, planning and zoning, et cetera, like how much has been discussed thus far?
So after that, we had 7 work sessions with the Planning Commission throughout all of 2017.
Yep.
And then I did a second presentation to the Assembly January 2nd, 2018. Then the Planning Commission held 3 separate, 4 public hearings before their approval. And then I just recently did a presentation for the Assembly on September 17th. And then also the Planning Commission had another information session on October 9th, just recently.
Thanks. And the reason I was asking is, as community member Mr. Whitethorn commented there's a lot in there, and I have digested this thing, and I've talked about it before. There is a lot in there. For instance, Mr. Whitethorn commented about the 750 square foot thing. Like, I never really considered that as for the caretaker dwelling, and again, it's after looking over it. And where I'm going with this is, after tonight, and I hope we do move this forward, we've got 2 additional public hearings, and I know the reading is pretty exhaustive, but I really wanted to encourage any member of the public, if there's some piece in there that they have a concern about, please bring it to us, like Mr. Whitethorn did tonight, because it's important for us to know. And these, even through this last year and a half worth of public meetings, it's easy to miss stuff. So for those of you listening at home and looking for some really lively and entertaining reading, I highly encourage you to go on the Borough website and see what might impact you and your life and your family, so that we can, either positively or negatively, so we can address it from up here. That's all.
Member Lynn?
Yeah, I listened to this on the schedule, and I'd like to go back, if we can, and revisit the schedule a little bit. Listening to this on the radio at the last meeting and the discussion around the table, I believe that, that we're going to be going for one of the meetings, and I really think that none of us sat here can answer some of the questions which the public might have, and if we're having a hearing and or, we can't answer those questions, and I really do think you need to be here, be present. Whether it be that meeting, and I have no problem because it's taken so long and there's so much in it, I think we need to really look at extending this out over another meeting or 2. And not to say you shouldn't be going, but just to extend it out so that your presence is here, because I think your presence is important. With that said, I also ask if there was a compendium of comments that came from previous meetings, and the answer was yes. And I will tell you that Liz has provided me with a compendium of the past comments from the other meetings, which would be available to everybody else. I haven't had a chance to go through them, but there seems to be some thread with some of the comments now that are coming up, and I think they're very valuable in terms of looking at, when we're back, looking at the final meeting of what people want to do. And with that, I've looked at it, and I've been through it, and I'm definitely not expert, but I'd like to consider two things in there that aren't there, and I really thank Mr. Whitethorn for his comments, but I would add 2 other things to that. One is that we're really replete in there in process in terms of an applicant and what they have to do and what they're required to do and the timeframes they have to meet. Turn that coin around and say, I really think that we need to put a time frame on this side saying that when we would respond to that applicant. And I'll use an example is that I think when I was on the assembly previously, there was a couple months where there was not a quorum with the Planning and Zoning Board. And we had people were there, they needed answers for their questions and their permits, and needed permits in hand to continue. And we were beginning to cost folks money. I really think that we need to look at putting timeframes on it and or putting a process in that if there's an X period of time in which the planning and zoning does not meet, that either the planning official makes that decision with the board, with an appeal to the board, or some other process. I'm not saying how it should be, but I really think there needs to be some timeframes added to it. If it's okay, Mr. Mayor, I have one other point I'd like to make.
Sure.
I could.
You've got the floor.
When I was trying to compare the standards that we're requiring for what we're calling remote sites to what the state now is required. And I'm not perfect on this by any means, but it seems to me that we need some kind of a comparison of what we now would require if the borough takes it over, and what the state requires, so that we can look at it. To me, initially, I get the impression that we're requiring more than now the state requires, but I may be wrong.
Okay,
With that, I'll stop.
Member Lynn, I think, so can I ask, I'd like to ask Liz a question. I see you back there taking notes, all the comments from Mr. Whitethorn and assembly members, and so you're going to put those in to bring up during the consideration of amendments? Is that I asked this before, if Mr. Whitethorn's comments will be officially on the record?
Some of them definitely, which are easy because they're just changing a number, right? So
Right.
That's a pretty easy amendment to put together. Some of them are more complex, like setting a time limit for a decision by the borough. That would involve creating a whole nother additional process, which is certainly doable, but I'd probably try to get with Member Lynn and have him maybe flesh out his idea a little bit more to provide some guidance on what that would really look like. I know other places down south have similar things, but I think you'd be surprised at what the deadline is, because what I've seen is about 180 days. And that's, they would consider that a win if they were able to issue a permit in 180 days, which to me would seem like a really long time. So I think that's a conversation I could have with Member Lynn just to get a little bit more details on that. And then the last thing he brought up with the remote subdivisions, we can certainly do a comparison on what the state requires versus what we have in the code, and I think that's a good comparison to make, folks.
Any other discussion? Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just have a couple, I don't know if they're questions or comments, but, for me personally, I would hope that if somebody has a public comment on this document, they don't tell me about it. They should write it down in a letter or get a hold of the planning and zoning or Liz so that it can be officially in a document when we're going to be looking at amendments. Because the way the schedule is written out, we had tonight, if we pass it, it'll be in its first reading, and then there's a varied dates for and opportunities for people to voice concerns and get stuff added to the amendments, so that and as planning and zoning is going through this process, hopefully they'll be able to address some of these questions. And, I know Chris Fry's here, chairman of the planning and zoning. And if I can ask Chris, are you comfortable answering the questions if Liz isn't here?
Yeah.
So just, Mr. Mayor, just so I can, this process has been going on for a while. I understand there's always questions and concerns about it, but at least we can start the ball rolling if we get to a point where there are some comments that Chris and the planning and zoning can't deal with. I'm sure they could get comments from Liz and address some of the questions, but I don't think, for me personally, I don't want every assembly meeting between now and when this is done should be a public comment period on the planning and zoning revision. I think planning and zoning is working through those things with Liz. I think if we have comments, we can give those to planning and zoning, but I think for me, I'm not up here to kind of deal with all the planning and zoning issues. I read this weekend. All I'm able to notice is a couple of typos, and I have a couple of questions about signage and stuff, but I know other people who are in the building industry and live out in remote sites are more in tune to it than I am, but I just want to make sure that we don't bypass planning and zoning with the assembly taking over their roles and responsibility.
I have a question of Liz. So if we stick with the proposed schedule, and we'll have to talk about that. If we're going to change it, we'll have to have a motion, and I don't know exactly how we're going to change that because we already voted on that. But December 17th, consideration of amendments and third reading of the assembly. That consideration of amendments, is the planning and zoning considering those amendments and then presenting it back to the assembly? Is all right now in the assembly's hands?
So the Planning Commission has already gone through their process, and so they considered all the amendments that got submitted to Planning and Zoning and basically approved out a document. That document went to the borough attorney and got reworked and massaged by the borough attorney. So all the policies that Planning and Zoning put in there, the numbers that Planning and Zoning put in there all stayed. There was some reworking with the attorney to kind of eliminate some processes that were redundant. And then that document is the one before you So planning and zoning is done. Now it's to you.
That's kind of where I thought we were at with this process. And then back to the other comment by Member Lynn trying to reschedule the hearings. I mean, I know this has been going on, like Member Stanton Greger asked Liz since 2017, so it's been quite a while. But I expressed my concern at the last meeting when we talked about the schedule that Director Cabrera could be here because, in my opinion, she's the one that drafted this document and worked with the attorney to go through it all. And I don't see any reason why bumping it back a week if we can do it technically correct by amending it, and maybe the clerk can steer us the right direction on that. Yeah, anyway, but like Member Beach was saying, the next meeting is the second reading of this ordinance on November 5th, and that has the first public hearing. So then people can come and comment, and hopefully those comments, I think it would be important for people to comment and want to make changes or put things on this document to be amended, that they do it in an email form so it's, officially recorded. And then the next scheduled meeting, just going over the schedule, is November 19th, and that's just a public hearing by the Assembly. And that doesn't even have the third reading, so that's then the third reading isn't until December. And then what do you have scheduled as, to clarify it in my mind, December 3rd, public comments accepted. Is that the deadline for public comments? Or is there a meeting where we're accepting them, but no formal public hearing? That's the deadline?
Well, you have a meeting scheduled that day, and certainly people could come and speak on, items not on the agenda about this, correct? So it's just a kind of an acknowledgement that there is a meeting, but hopefully we'll have all of the comments or most of them by then. And the reason there's a lag time is so that I can get all of the amendments and really understand, if we're going to make this change, a lot of times a single change affects many other parts of the code, and I need to be able to go through and make sure that we're not just doing a half a job when we're making amendments. So to give enough time to kind of go through and make sure that we have all the amendments laid out in context, and we have all of public comments and all the staff comments together for each one of those amendments, it takes a little bit of time. And
right. So people could come and submit their comments at that December 3rd meeting, and it's not going to have a third reading. That won't be till December 17th, so they could, under views related to...
Their comments might be stuck at the very end when it comes time to look at the amendments, but that's kind of what I'm trying to say, is it'd be great if you got those in beforehand so that we had a chance to really incorporate them as a real amendment,
Time to digest them. Member Lynn?
Process question. Then your intent is to take all the comments from tonight and so forth, make a recommendation on each individual comment, and then ask for a vote on each comment? Is that your thinking, or how I'm looking at process?
I don't know if that's the answer, but I thought that's what you...
Yeah, so for instance, like Mr. Whitethorn's recommendation that we eliminate that 750 square foot restriction on caretaker dwelling. So I would put together an amendment, and you would see the page in the code with that change in it, and it would come with a staff recommendation on whether we, either had a positive approve, disapprove, or no comment, no recommendation. Maybe staff comments on it, and also Mr. Whitethorn's comments on it. So that way you get a sense of how this fits into the bigger picture, how it fits into the context of the actual code, what the staff thinks about it, and what the public's saying about it. So that's what we did with the Planning Commission, and Chris can speak to whether that process worked well for them as far as keeping it orderly and not having one amendment on top of another amendment, which can get very confusing for a group of people to navigate. So.
Member Bucci?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm in favor of this ordinance, obviously, but if Assemblymember Lind, at the next meeting wants to bring a revised schedule to push it back, I can deal with that. I don't think the intent is to jam this down people's throat, but I think I'd like to see this document move along. I also want to thank Chris and the Planning and Zoning Commission. I've sat in on a few of those meetings, and they are tough. They are tough. There's a process that's in place that sometimes it seems a little more formal than what we're doing up here, but they entertain some interesting ideas that, with the help of Liz, they kind of navigate this document, which is quite the document. And I just wanted to say thank you publicly to Chris and the Planning and Zoning.
Okay, so back to the discussion on the ordinance. Is there, I guess it would take, Debbie, correct me if I'm not proceeding right, would it take an amendment? I mean, in the schedule...
I don't think so. I think the schedule was approved at the last meeting, October 1st.
Right.
I believe that you would only need to make a motion to amend the schedule that was approved at the October 1st meeting, and then everybody would vote on it.
And then we move on with the, okay, that's what I was thinking we would do. So if Member Lynn wanted to make a motion to bump this whole schedule back by 1 week, or whatever his motion would be, if there's a second and discussion and a vote, and it passes, and we'll change the schedule.
Okay. Well, I move that we move it back one meeting forward to agreeing, I think, to the next year then, because I believe that's, I don't have a schedule here in front of me, so I don't.
It would probably, yeah, I think the second reading then would be, actually it would, well, I doubt if it'd be this, yeah, it'd be in December, because it's not going to be Christmas Eve. And so the first meeting's on the 3rd, second meeting's on the 17th. Currently, this consideration of amendments and the third reading by the Assembly is scheduled for December 17th. So, you know, in my mind, we could leave the second reading and first public hearing of this on the November 5th as it's scheduled, and then move the meeting of November 19th to December 3rd, and then on. So it would go into the first meeting of January 2019, which would be the 7th of January, is what I'm looking at.
Yes. So I'd move the last one to the 7th of January and make the adjustments that you were talking about.
Okay. Do you have that written down, Clerk, in some form of a motion? Is there a second to that?
Yes.
Second, or no?
I believe, if possible, I believe Director Cabrera wanted to interject something. She was waving semi-frantically.
So I made my travel plans after you approved your schedule, and I'm not going to be here. So
it's irrelevant what we do.
yeah, sorry. I actually, waited until after you approved it and then did my plans. So
Okay, so...
Either way, I'll second for the sake of discussion.
Okay, so motion's been made by Member Lynn to move the scheduling back a week after the second reading of November 5th and the first public hearing, and it was seconded by Member Stanton Gregor. Discussion. Member Morrell.
Okay, so when are you going to be out of town? Which meetings will you be out of town?
I'm here all the way through what you've got scheduled right now. And then I'm gone the 7th, but I'll be back for the meeting on the 21st.
January 21st?
Yeah, but
So that would be the final meeting. And so what we would do is, but you won't be on the 19th, and that's for the public hearing.
right.
Thanksgiving week.
Even if we change this, that's why we're changing it, but then we'll have...
Right, I wouldn't be here that day either way, yeah. So the 19th and then the January 7th, I won't be here either.
Member Stanton Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm comfortable with the schedule the way it is, with Chairman Fry saying he'd feel comfortable answering questions in place of Liz. I have no problems on moving forward with that, and I have confidence that if he feels comfortable, it will work itself out. So I'm good with the schedule the way it is.
I can answer questions concerning the code as we've got it. Anything that's been changed, I'd have to ask. So, the other thing is I'll also be gone January 7th.
Okay.
Thank you.
You know, another thing to consider in all of this is December 17th, the way it's scheduled now, we do the consideration of amendments. That would be before the third and final reading. And we could also put a public hearing on the agenda if we felt there was a third public hearing was necessary, if enough people from the public wanted to. We could just put it on there, and then if people, we'll see how much comment we have at the second, the first public hearing, which is on the 5th. So anyway, any other discussion on the amendment? Clerk, call the roll.
Jay?
No.
Randy?
No.
Mark?
No.
Jeff?
No.
Kurt?
Nope.
Bob?
No.
Okay, so we're back to the main motion, which is the ordinance 2018-18, an ordinance amending the Petersburg Municipal Code. Is there any discussion on the main motion? Clerk, call the roll.
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Okay, first reading of ordinance 2018-18 passes unanimously. And before we get on to the next ordinance, I'm going to ask if anybody would like to take a little break. Cool, take 5. We'll reconvene in 5 minutes or so. Oh, it's been 5 minutes. No, we made it through that little break in 4 minutes.
That's not bad. Really?
Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order. Brings us to ordinance 2018-19, item B under new business. And this is an ordinance amending Petersburg Municipal Code, section 4.28.020, sales tax definitions, to clarify that marine passenger ship cruise ticket contracts that are subject to Petersburg Borough's marine passenger fee are not subject to Petersburg Borough sales tax. And Jody Tao sent us an explanation, but I entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Stanton Gregor. Was that second by Member Michi?
Yes, sir.
So discussion. Any discussion on this? Member Stanton Gregor.
I wish Finance Director Tao was here tonight because I didn't get a chance to follow up with her enough. As far as listening to the borough business with Mr. Mayor and Member Lynn today, and I thank people that called in. It is I still find myself confused on this. The way I'm reading it, and if anybody on this, Debbie or anyone else, knows the answer, or if I'm inaccurate in my assumption, just interrupt me and call me out. I believe that Director Tao had realized we'd not been collecting sales tax that we were, at least according to current code, we were entitled to, and that's what got this whole ball rolling. Is that correct, Clerk Thompson? Or some version of that?
Some version of that, yes.
And in all fairness, I think it's really important to collect money due to us from tourism. That's just the reality of it. If we're entitled to some, we should have it. That said, I very much empathize with the cruise ship industry trying to, if I buy a $15,000 ticket and my neighbor buys a $5,000 ticket, trying to calculate how much time they were in the borough and their own individual sales tax. I mean, that's an unfair burden to put on anybody doing business in the borough. It just seems ludicrous. And Scott Hersey called in today and talking about him doing business here, and they're paying full price. I'm having a hard time reconciling that right now and how to move forward on it, and I'm not sure what to do right now without Finance Director Tao here. So I'll cede the floor and see if I can learn more from you guys about where we should be going with this.
Member Lynn.
Yeah. After listening to Scott and folks today on the radio, I'm somewhat also confused. The other question I think that they raised indirectly is that you really have an honest system here. Is that they report what they've done. For instance, we don't have anybody up in Endicott Arm or Hobart Bay to know who's been in there, who's done so and so. So it's more of an honesty type of thing that we're collecting for. I think the issue, in thinking about it, the issue really doesn't have to be decided, right now. This issue could, we could look at this in more depth, I think, over the next month or so, because, for the summer, the cruise ships are done. I think we'd be better off taking a little bit longer term look at it.
Well, I was at the Borough calling shortly as well, and after Mr. Hersey called in and Mr. Berg called in for biking travel, and then looking at this, I got a little bit perplexed myself, and it wouldn't be any burden on anybody if someone made a motion, in my opinion, to postpone the first reading till the next meeting, which would be the 5th of November. Member Monroe?
Oh, I was going to say, I asked Jody about this as well, and she said that there was only one person that currently, or a company that currently does that, which I'm assuming is Scott, and same thing. It kind of confused me as well. So I think that I would like to make a motion to table this to a later date.
Set aside until the 5th?
Postpone.
Postpone, sorry.
That's
It's
okay.
all good.
Second. Okay, so there's been a motion made to postpone. Do you want to put a date out, the first meeting till November 5th?
Is
And
that
I believe
pushing
Joe,
back?
member, finance director will be back in town. And then we're not delaying things by too long. And you seconded that, Mr.?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Okay, so now we're on to the motion to postpone the first reading of this ordinance 2018-19 until November 5th of 2018. Discussion. Member Stanton Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, I think with lots of different financial interests at stake here, I feel very comfortable waiting until the first meeting in November so we can, whatever we do, we feel like we're doing it with the best information possible.
Okay. Member Mucci?
Well, it's not really germane to the motion to table, but, the marine passenger fee, if your ship's accommodating for 20 or fewer passengers, isn't paying it. So somebody like Mr. Hersey's not paying the marine passenger fee. That's under the marine passenger fee ordinance. I think all this does is, it's not this motion, but the original motion to change this marine passenger fee is all we're looking to do is, if you come to Petersburg, instead of going through a complex formula to decide how much of your cruise is spent in Petersburg and paying a sales tax based on that, all we're going to do, all the city is going to do is turn a form over to the cruise ships, and they're going to say how many people were on board here when they stopped here. And they're going to pay a mortgage fee for tying up to the dock, and they're going to pay a $5 a head marine passenger fee. That's all it is.
Correct, but then in my assumption, I was thinking about this today, is if that's all they're paying is a $5 per passenger marine passenger fee, and people with less passengers are paying, if the person pays $1,200 for their trip, whether it's a day trip or a 2-day trip, they're going to be paying $72. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy there. And that's why when we voted on this marine passenger fee, I don't think I was in support of it at the time as well. But anyway, that's just my take on it. But we're discussing the amendment right now to postpone this first reading until November 5th. Member Stanton Gregor?
I withdraw my statement.
So any other discussion on the amendment to postpone the first reading of this ordinance 2018-19 till November 5th? If none, clerk call the roll.
Jeff?
Sure.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Okay, passes unanimously to postpone the first reading of this ordinance till November 5th. That brings us to resolution number 18-13, resolution 2018-13, a resolution requesting USDA's Inspector General to, 1, conduct a forensic audit of the Tonka and Big Thorn Integrated Resource Timber contracts, and 2, restore payment of funds from which affected communities should have benefited. I'll entertain a motion to adopt this resolution as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Stanton Gregor. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Member Mucci.
I'd like to amend this resolution to remove a sentence in the thereof in the first number 1. I'd like to amend this resolution to remove the words, and what misadministration or maladministration occurred. I'd like to have that removed from this resolution.
Which whereas is that in?
It's on the first, it's on the, after therefore be it resolved,
Okay.
number 1. Number B, or letter B. Remove the words, what misadministration or maladministration occurred.
Okay, so there's been a motion been made by Member Mucci to remove those words from section B in the first therefore. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Member Borough. Discussion on the amendment. Member Stanton Gregor?
Sure, if Member Miucci feels comfortable, would care to explain why you'd like those removed?
Member Mucci?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm not real concerned about, saying somebody misadministrated the sale or maladministrated the sale. I just want to sort out what actually happened, and I don't want to get into. I just want to stay away from those types of words. I just want to talk about this resolution as it stands without accusing somebody or something of doing something wrong.
Okay. Any other discussion? Member Stanton Gregor?
Sure. I keyed in on that language also. And in the Washington Office Activity Review, that's consistent with language that the U.S. Forest Services themselves have used. They were pretty accountable for some of those mistakes made, at least in the Washington Office Review, just as a point of information.
Okay, so is there any more discussion on the amendment to remove that section from the first, therefore, section B? Clerk, call the roll.
Jeff?
Did you move the
I
roll?
want to make one more comment there. If we were going to remove it there, then we probably also have to remove it from the third whereas too, because it says it right at the very bottom there. We're not collecting.
Unless you want to make an amendment to the amendment.
No, I'm just saying if we were going to move it there, we'd have to remove it there also at some point, so go ahead. I'm good now.
Correct, but I think the proper procedural way to do that would be either to amend the motion to remove that or vote on this and then make another amendment.
Yep.
Will the clerk call the roll on the amendment?
Okay. Jay?
No.
Kurt?
No.
Bob? No.
Brandy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Okay, well, it fails with a 3-3 vote, so the words will stay in there. Is there any other discussion on the main motion? Member Lynn?
Yes, I've read this, and I've got some real heartburn with it, having been the Director of Forest Management in Washington, for a number of reasons. First of all, there's always two sides to an issue, and this is one side. So I called today, not having seen any of this before Friday, late Friday, I called today and asked for details, and I finally got a copy of the activity plan. The activity review within the agency is done to correct or to look at, internally, look at things that need to be corrected, and it did that. It did a fairly good job of that. I haven't been through it all the way, but if we're going to provide a motion, and this motion here is exactly the same one that's right now on the Pure website, if we're going to make a motion, I think we need to go back and look at it from the standpoint of this borough and what it means to this borough. When I made some telephone calls today on it, and I would have to say that there was also usually there's a follow-up action plan with this, which I've not seen, and which I understand is done. But there was also an internal review asked for by the Forest Service, by the Associate Chief. That review is being done independently out of Albuquerque by a group of people who were not part of this, or not even in instance been in Alaska. That's also made up of several OIG folks who used to be employees of OIG. That review is supposed to be done soon. I didn't get a particular date on it, nor would I even hesitate or say what it might be. I think in terms of, we need to look at going forward, yeah, there's corrective items here, and yeah, it needs to be fixed. And I don't disagree with that. But to go back and to ask for another audit when there's already one ongoing and one that's supposed to come to conclusion, I don't think is correct, because all that does is just jam things up, really. From the borough standpoint, I think we need to look at it from a positive way. And the positive way would be to write a letter asking, first of all, if we wanted to, maybe the Chief of the Forest Service or the Secretary of Agriculture, to give us an update on what is going on and when we can expect some results of the current internal investigations, rather than go through and ask for another audit. So with that, I would move that this letter not be sent, and that we draft our letter to the Secretary of Agriculture.
Okay, is there any other discussion? Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, number one, this is not a letter, it's just a resolution to try and get some answers to see if things are due Petersburg and Thorn Bay based on stuff that didn't happen at the Forest Service regarding a couple timber sales. I have no idea some of the acronyms that Councilor or Assemblymember Lynn's talking about. I don't know, didn't have a chance to know anything about the phone calls, but this resolution has been before us for quite a while, for like probably a year. We had an assembly member here who worked for the Forest Service, and this resolution was going to cause him some uncomfort at work. And I didn't want that to happen. I respected him too much to kind of jam it down his throat and make him vote on it. And now we have an opportunity to kind of move this thing forward. If somebody would like to submit a letter to the Forest Service, we can certainly do that, but this has been out there for a while. It can't hurt to ask. One of the, number two there, it asks our representatives and our senators if there's sufficient funds to conduct the audit. Well, if they come back and tell us that there's no funds to do it, well, I guess we'd have to figure out something else to do. But if the way the Forest Service did a couple of timber sales and money was due Petersburg and Thorn Bay, then we need to kind of sort that out and find out how much money is owed Petersburg and Thorn Bay. That's all I'm asking for. I'm not pointing fingers at this, that, the other. I just kind of want to sort out if more funds are due Petersburg. It seems like we get put behind, we're hearing from this agency that it's almost done. That might be factual, but I can't hold on to it like I can hold on to this. And this is just my attempt to make sure that Petersburg, and specifically Petersburg, has all the funds coming to them from these timber sales, and if not, let's go to the next step and see how we're going to find out.
Member Stan Greger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I'll start with a quick point of information from Member Lynn. I had brought up the idea of writing a letter, as you suggested, several months back, and it was a 2-2 failure. But I respect that thought. I thought it was a good one also. Here's where I get hung up. The Washington office, that's the U.S. Forest Service. It's not... it's the Forest Service. It's not a fringe group. It's nobody with an agenda. It's the Forest Service. And their recommendation, as a member of the public, Ms. Knight, stated, was to recommend an independent review. I mean, that's the Forest Service recommending an independent review. Them. I don't think this resolution can hurt in asking for that. I'm encouraged by what Member Lynn said about an independent review going on. I don't think this has to work against that. I'm just thinking out loud, but if the resolution passes, they receive this, they email back, hey, independent review already underway, we'll update you when you have findings. I don't think that has to be conflictual with that current reality. I could be wrong on that, but I don't see it that way. If in fact, we don't know if Petersburg, is due monies, but I'd like to find out. Our schools are a very valuable part of our community and the infrastructure of this place. And the Forest Service is a great neighbor, a huge part of our community here. And in any community, we hold our neighbors accountable for good and bad, and we want to work together. And if something like this could help us get that situation or potential situation resolved, I'd be remiss not to vote for it right now. So I'll be definitely be supporting this resolution tonight.
Any other discussion? Well, Member Lynn?
Yeah, I've got a, I'll be remiss, it is a resolution tonight, forgive me for not, but I'm still of a mind that I think this is the absolute wrong way to go, for a number of reasons. First of all, that is our backyard. And I think we need to state positively, this is negative in my mind, positively what we want, whether you want to use a resolution or whether you want to use a letter. I think we need to give them a chance to respond to where they're at before we go and go to all other agencies. I also believe that OIG already turned down a different audit an audit on this. So with that, I couldn't vote for it. I can tell you that right now. I think it needs to be either a letter or a resolution that supports what we want in a positive way from this borough.
Member Roll, did you have a comment? Or?
Yeah, I was just going to say, for me, I think that Bob's the one that probably, Member Lynn's the one that probably knows the most about this, and I like to, take a professional's opinion. And I think that that's probably, this does look very negative, and I think that I like the idea of sending a letter and asking where you're at as opposed to a resolution that could conflict with something that's already currently going on.
Member Walhooter?
This is a question for Member Lynn. Hey, Bob, what is OIG?
Office of the Inspector General.
Okay.
There's a branch within the Department of Agriculture that does independent reviews, but then there's also other independent auditors. The group that my understanding, and I'll say this with a little bit of, I won't say it's exactly, but there is an independent group out of Albuquerque that is now doing the review on this, that does exactly what Member Mucci is asking for, that is looking at the finances associated with this. And keep in mind, this is a stewardship contract, so yeah, there's two sides of this. The money is not in the 25% fund. The money is in stewardship, and that goes back in, and some of the money has already been expended on the stewardship side of this, on Cascade Creek, on pre-commercial thinning, on Mitchell Creek access. There's still money in the pot, and I don't disagree that we need to look to see where there's other money. I understand there's other money available to be used for the stewardship, and yes, I agree with what Becky said earlier, that some of that money, does come back into salaries and so forth within the community and contracts within the community. So we do need to get as much as we can. But I think there's an easier way than this to approach this subject.
Any other discussion on this resolution? This is not the time for public comment, sorry.
Thank you.
Clerk, call the roll.
Okay. Jay?
Yes.
Kurt?
No.
Bob?
No.
Randy?
No.
Mark?
No.
Jeff?
Yes.
Okay, the resolution fails with a 4-2 vote with Member Stanton Greger and Member Mucci in favor. That brings us to the next item on the agenda. And that is item 18, or D, 18-328, scheduling an assembly/hospital board work session. And Clerk Thompson has been collecting availability from, I believe, the medical center staff as well as the assembly. And did we come up with a date that we have a good number that we could vote on?
We do. It's actually this coming Wednesday, the 17th. And the most popular time is 3 to 5 p.m. We do not have a Brandy in that slot, so I don't know if you would be able to make it. You said okay to 4 to 6, but not 3 to 5.
I can see what I can do.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a work session. There's not going to be any
Even if you
formal
came
action.
a little bit late, would be okay. And on Member Stanton Greger did say that he he is probably, but not positively, there.
Correct. Well, that still leaves us with at least 4 assembly members, and how many people from the...
Most of the people from the hospital, except for those that are out of town, it looks like to me.
So it's the same scenario.
Yeah, it is the best option if that works for everyone.
And they wanted to do this, the reason we're trying to get it done this month is because they have something in November that they're going to...
Correct.
So they wanted to get this work session together to get public input?
Correct.
If I remember right.
Or to talk to you guys about things, yes.
Right. So, how do we go about this? To entertain a motion to have the clerk advertise a work session between the medical center and the assembly on October 17th from 3 to 5 p.m.
So moved. Second.
Okay. Who made the motion?
Yep.
Jeff, did you make the motion, Member Ricci? And seconded by Member Lynn. Okay, so all those in favor of that schedule, say aye. Aye. Okay, that brings us to communications. Does anybody have any communications that weren't listed on the agenda? Okay, we'll move on to assembly discussion items. There was nothing listed, but Member Mucci mentioned something earlier, so it's not even 7:45 yet. Member Mucci.
That's good. That's a good thing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 2 things. The first thing is I'd kind of like to find out at the assembly level here if there's a desire to have a work session regarding recycling, composting, the solid waste issues in Petersburg sometime in November through mid-December.
I think that would be a great idea myself. Does it seem appropriate to wait till Public Works Director Cotta gives us a presentation on the baler? I think the baler is going to be a big money ticket for us. We're going to have to discuss soon because I believe it's still not functioning. Member Mucci.
Thank you. I think the doodle poll that Debbie sent out to us is a good way to kind of get, if we're available, to be in those dates. Not that tech savvy, but it seemed to be pretty easy for me to deal with, and I think it's a good, and get Chris Cotta there and the assembly members and community members and kind of sort out when we're going to be available. So I really like that.
I like that format
Yes.
you used. I thought that was very good.
Great. It was easy for me, too.
Okay.
I'm glad you found that.
Thank you.
It was suggested to me by Jody.
No. Okay. So, yeah, you just want to get that by the end of next month, or?
Mr. Mayor, it could be by the end of November is fine. I mean, I know we have 2 meetings in November, and members are traveling for conferences and stuff, so, if it happened in November, that'd be great, but it could certainly be in the first week or so of December.
Okay.
I mean,
And I agree, it might be good to advertise and put it out there, because it is a, I wouldn't call it a hot topic around town, but recycling is important to a lot of people.
So more than just a work session, it's actually going to be a public forum where we're going to take comment and all that?
Member Meeker?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. I don't know about comments, but I know you're going to get questions from the community about how the program works, where the stuff goes, how often it's tested, what we can do to make it a better system so it doesn't cost the borough as much money as it does, so we can reduce costs borough-wide.
Okay.
And see if that is a possibility to provide more. Because I know we mentioned grinding glass, and now it just goes in the landfill, and I think Ketchikan has a glass grinder. I have no idea of the cost, or if you have to hire another employee, and what you can use it for, but I know there is uses. They cover landfill, send stuff with it. Remember, Michi?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's a YouTube video about a company in New Zealand that they take the bottles after they're done, and it goes into this machine, and it crushes it into sand-type materials.
Yeah, remember, Michi?
Yeah, the last thing I have, Mr. Mayor, is have just a brief update from the Chamber of Commerce. The visitor industry is trying, and the Chamber of Commerce is trying to get together a community-wide meeting to kind of look at the visitor industry impacts on Petersburg, specifically, more or less, how we're going to deal with a cruise ship that comes in that impacts the community. And they're looking at November 13th, 14th, or 15th to have that community discussion about what folks are thinking, some of the questions that they have about the visitor industry and how it impacts Petersburg. They're continuing that discussion, and hopefully we'll have some type of announcement at the meeting of the 5th.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, well, maybe we could have that on the agenda of November 5th for an official discussion, and then it'll be noticed, and people will have time to come and talk under views-related items on the agenda. But yeah, it's going to be a discussion that the community needs to have. Member Lynn?
I was just going to say that, just keep in mind that you and I will be gone 14th through the 16th of those.
Exactly, yeah, but that's why I stated those dates earlier. And then I get back on the 16th, I leave on the 17th, so I don't get back till December 1st. So I'll miss one meeting in November, then I'll be back for the winter. Any recognitions? Member Stangreger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to congratulate both Member Lynn and Member Norheim and welcome them to the Assembly. It'd be great to serve with you two. And I would like to recognize former Assembly Member Nancy Strand and thank her for her service. For those of you listening at home, she would sit, if you're looking up here, she'd be sitting to my left. She was never failed to give me a different perspective on topics. She was always prepared, and just from a personal point of view, she was a pleasure to serve with. So thank you, Member Strand.
Thank you, Member Stanton Gregory. Any other recognitions of anybody? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved.
Second.
Those in favor say aye. Aye. Meeting is adjourned.